after implementing the things I told you, in terms of how you feel now in comparison to when you first did the consultation, like what are the mental and physical benefits that you like feel if you were to summarize them?
I think I just feel a lot sharper. That's like the one word that was summarized it.
Okay,
Just yeah, I don't have brain fog. I don't feel tired, you know. I just feel my
wonderful,
mind works a lot better now.
wonderful. And so, do you recommend that other people talk to me?
Of course. Okay,
Mhm.
I wanna ask you about like inflammation,
Inflammation.
Mhm. So I saw your video, the 24 body signs.
Yes,
Yeah, and you said that dark eye circles can come from some sort of liver or kidney damage.
yes.
And then I also heard from somebody else, Dr. Eric Berg, that neck and back pain and all these type of joint pains might come from liver damage. So do you think that that could be like something that's wrong with me? You know?
I wouldn't say so. I would say it's just the totality. With dark eye circles, it's just a sign that you have a lot of cell damage in general,
Mm-hmm.
that you can't create energy well, that the energy status in your body is not so good. So the only exception would be when you're sick, but otherwise, if you haven't slept well, obviously your body can't burn as much energy because it has a lot of damage that it hasn't repaired. So usually, if you look below the eyes, you'll see that they're dark. And then if someone has persistent dark eye circles, that's the same situation, but in general.
Mm-hmm.
And for metabolism, you need a lot of nutrients, you need your mitochondria to work well. If you have a bunch of environmental factors that are messing up your mitochondria, and you're not getting any nutrients, then of course that's going to manifest on your face and on your energy levels. They're sort of related. And that's why we say that, people with messed up adrenals, uh, dark eye circles are generally associated with messed up adrenals. And again, that's just a manifestation of the same thing.
Yeah, then I read the the EMF in my room, right? The power supply and everything. All the things in my all the electronics. My computer's been broken recently. So I turned everything off. I realized that my sleep has been getting like a lot better. So I'm calling you on a laptop right now, my mom's laptop.
All right?
Yeah, but I realized that my sleep has gotten a lot better just from getting rid of the EMFs. Do you think it's the EMFs or mainly like the sunlight? Because that's the
Both.
only thing I changed.
Both. It's always everything in the environment. But in general, because the EMF is related to, the place where you're sleeping, if you think about it, what does EMF do? Well, in the case of electric fields, especially, which would be the thing coming from the computer mainly, the other things come from the phone. RF comes from the phone, the router.
Mm.
An electric field is going to stimulate, the nervous system, the entire electrical system in the body. And so the nervous system is going to be overactive, especially the brain. If that stuff hits the brain, then the brain's going to go boop, 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 boop. It's going
Yeah.
to perform chemical reactions that it shouldn't be performing. And so then you suddenly remove that, and of course, your nervous system is going to be far less active. So, yes, of course, you're going to sleep better. And that's why people report that when they sleep outside in the forest, in a tent, they
Hmm.
sleep a lot better. And that's because of a multitude of factors. But one of them is that you're off the power grid.
And then you're also connected with the earth, right? Since you're grounding.
Yes, I mean, usually some people buy grounding mats and they connect them to their grounding outlet, or they pull a copper wire outside to the ground, which is the best case, really, because if you connect it to the
Mm.
grounding outlet in the house, then you're going to get a bunch of dirty electricity. And that's something I found out from a podcast that Paul Saladino did with a guy, an EMF expert. I recommend watching that episode. It was pretty good. But yes, with
Mhm.
grounding, you're getting more electrons. Your body will perform whatever it's doing more effectively if you're grounded. So yes, you're going to sleep better if you're grounded.
Another thing I did for the sleep was I started sleeping on the floor. I saw one of your very old videos. I think it's called the Roman Emperor's Sleep Hack. Something like
Yes.
that. The one, yeah. I saw that. So I decided to start sleeping on the floor. Everybody thought I was crazy for like the past week. So I realized my back pain has gotten a lot better, but I haven't gotten rid of the pillow yet. So I still have some neck pain. It's a bit better. So do you think I should get rid of the pillow?
Yes, I think so. What I do is I sleep on my hand. So I put
Yeah.
my hand over at the temple area because if you put it here, over a period of years, I think your zygomatic bone will start going in. You usually see that if people consistently sleep on one side of their face, you're going to see that the structure is very different. So I used to sleep a lot on this side of my face, and you
Mm-hmm.
can see that the teeth are, bent inwards a little bit. This side of the face is a little bit less, um, I'd say less attractive in general. But and one part of that is, of course, that the masseter muscle over here is stronger because I used to chew over here, but I also used to sleep on this side. So with when you remove the pillow, a few things happen. For me, a big thing was that ever since I was a child, my face used to get overheated. And so when you
Mm-hmm.
sleep on your hand, you've got airflow on this side of the face, and you never get overheated, which is a wonderful thing, really. The other thing is that your neck is aligned, and of course, you have no pressure on the bones on the face. You just have some pressure over here, which is natural in my opinion. Um, but yes, your neck is aligned when you have, when you sleep like that. When you sleep without a pillow, with a pillow, it usually does this to your head, and it also, well, this is generally related to sleeping on the floor, but you can maintain a sideways position better in general.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it much easier because on the bed you can flip around a lot,
Yeah.
while if you sleep on the floor you can maintain a good position. But in general, that's another thing. That's a general thing when it comes to sleeping on the floor. But when it comes to removing the pillow, you get better neck alignment, you get better flow of air. And to me, it's just more comfortable in general.
Yeah.
I can't see how smothering this side of your head can be comfortable.
Do you know any way they can sleep on their back on the floor? Because I've tried to do that, but feels a bit weird, you know.
It's the in the beginning, the reason I started doing it is because I noticed that when I was listening to something on my iPad, late at night, and I made or not late at night, but in the evening, and it was dark, I used to lay on that carpet,
Mm-hmm.
listening to something, and I noticed that I always used to, lay down on my back without a pillow, without anything, just on the carpet, and it used to be fairly comfortable. And I used to get tired, and I'd think to myself, man, I could fall asleep right now, but I have to brush my teeth and everything, and I have to,
Yeah.
do a bunch of stuff before I go to bed. So I thought, well, if it's this comfortable, then why can't I sleep like this? And I noticed that when I was sleeping on the floor, my back didn't hurt. I used to go to the gym a lot. In that period, I used to deadlift, and I noticed that whenever I went to sleep, my back would hurt. So the transition to going, sleeping on the floor was because I had back pain, and I had noticed that when I laid in that position, I didn't get back pain. So in the beginning, I used to sleep, laying on my back on the floor. That's in the beginning, but then I learned that sleeping on the side is healthier. So yes, if you don't want to sleep on the back, I'll tell you this right now, whenever I go to bed, I usually begin at the back just to relax, and then I go to the side when I want to actually fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have pain somewhere, sure, you don't need to sleep on your back. That's the unnatural position. The natural position is on your side.
Yeah, that makes sense. You wouldn't sleep because I realized when you sleep on your back, your lower back isn't supported just because of how the floor is.
It depends. I mean, it depends on the size of your butt. If you have a very big butt or a very small butt, then that might happen. But in general, if you like play with the flex of the spine, you can play with
Oh
the
yeah.
flex of the spine. If you squeeze your butt, for example, then your spine straightens. If you bring it back, then the spine flexes. So if you play with that angle, then usually you'll find a comfortable position.
Mm-hmm.
But if you feel like it doesn't feel good if the back isn't supported, then of course just sleep on your side. It's better for the brain in general.
You said to sleep on your right side, right?
E- Actually, it depends. If you have gastric issues, it might be better to sleep on the left side. But in general, for the heart and just for digestion in general, I'd say the right is better. Sleeping on the left side can be beneficial if you have gastric issues because then the gastric acid won't really, it will accumulate in the stomach without going to any of the sphincters, the one that attaches to the esophagus and the one that attaches to the small intestine. But if you've eaten something and you have something in your stomach, and also for the heart, if you sleep on your right side, that's much better because then the food doesn't get trapped and in general, it seems to be better to not sleep on the side of your heart.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you can kind of just doesn't really matter, right? You just turn around.
I mean, I'd say the right side is best. And then there's also a position that they teach you here in Sweden. We have something called HLR, so um, heart and lung emergency. You know, the thing where you pump, you learn how to do the to save someone who's unconscious, basically, whose heart has stopped. I can't remember what that's called in English, but they teach you that if someone's unconscious but their heart is beating, you put them in this certain position that I show in the video.
Yeah.
And
So
they say that the circulation is best in that position. So what I say in the video is that, or my thought process at least, is that, well, if your circulation is best in that position, then obviously I should sleep in it. And so ever since then, I mean, I just find it more comfortable in general. Um, so I sleep in that position.
I also heard Weston A. Price in his book, I think it was chapter 14, around there. He said that sunlight isn't as important as people think because it only really gives you vitamin D3, and there's a lot of other types of vitamin D. He said it was like eight to 12, I think. 8 to 12 different isolated and partially isolated substances of vitamin D.
Mm,
So like
For the most part, I mean, you could count the byproducts, calcidiol, calcitriol, and a bunch of other vitamin D thingies. But for the most part, scientifically speaking, we say that um, what's it called? 25 hydroxy cholecalciferol is
mhm,
vitamin D. So it's generally one molecule that we
yeah.
count as vitamin D, and that's what you get from 7-dehydrocholesterol and everything. So it's generally, I'd say it's one thing.
Mhm.
Yes, but in terms of Weston A. Price saying that we don't need a lot of sun, I mean, that's just a sign that he doesn't understand his own work really. All the tribes he visited were outside. Many of them had minimal clothing. So it
Yeah.
was not just again, as Jack Cruz says, it's not that we've changed the food. We have changed the food, of course. That's affecting us drastically, in my opinion. He might disagree, but I disagree with him then. We've also changed the light environment drastically. We get far
Yeah.
less sun exposure. We're wearing clothes. We're doing all these things. We're not in the environment we've always been in. So when you look at his work, all these tribes are, for the most part, they're outside and they're getting a lot of sunlight, which means that, of course, sunlight is a part of why these people are healthy. So him saying that we don't need sunlight is because he isolated sunlight to just vitamin D, but that's not the case. Sunlight does far more than just vitamin D, and if you've watched my sunlight video, then that should be
Yeah, I
apparent.
saw. The reason I'm asking is because I think he went to St. Moritz. He looked at the modernized people. And he found, I think, that the modernized people also had a lot of sun, the environment was very nice. So I think, do you think it's because of the pollution? Because they were also eating a bad diet, although they had the sun. So do you think that they were unhealthy in spite of having the sun?
No, for me, it's very I use the scientific method, so it's very easy. If you have two islands and they're living exactly the same way, but you change the food, and you see that the health of the population is declining, then
Hmm.
obviously the food is the issue.
Yeah,
That's an isolated factor. So then, if we look at these modernized people who have the same light environment, let's say, and the only difference is the food, then of course it's the food. So you remove the sunlight, you get problems. You bad it back, you solve those problems. You remove the good food, you get problems,
yeah.
etc., etc. That's how I think about it, at least. So yes, in that case, if truly that's the only factor, then it's food.
So I guess the sunlight doesn't really like compensate for the bad diet, right? It has to be everything. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, for optimal health, yes, certainly.
Mhm.
It in I mean, it does give you can tolerate more things in the environment. Like we've used legumes and nuts
Mhm.
and seeds and whatnot, things in the environment that are harsher on the digestive tract for survival. But we've been in a pristine environment and we haven't had pollution and we haven't had any, gut problems. And again, we're also omnivores. We're supposed to handle those things because we're the most adaptable mammal on the planet. Um, so we should have that tolerance. But again, in modern society, yeah, you should really hone down on both because you have a bigger monster that's pollution, you have EMF, you have other factors outside of just sunlight and food.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can't really eat what you want because you have other things that affect you as well. So in general, just perfecting everything is the way I go about it. I don't try to, skimp out on anything. So yeah, always focus on both, like personally. And of course, if you remove anything from a certain population, sunlight, any factor, you add EMF, of course, you're going to find some problems. And the more um, good factors they have together with that, the more resilient they're going to be. So that's the way I think about it.
Yeah, I didn't really think EMF was a very big issue, And then I saw your video, and then I saw Amelie's like cottage remedies video. Then she compared the iPhone and the Samsung phone, and then he said like what 2.5 million for the RF. I didn't think it was a really big issue though. So is it really true like it can really cause cancer? It can cause like these DNA breakages because it's
Yes.
basically like living in a microwave, right?
Yes, yes, it can. Well, a microwave will be a little bit stronger, of course,
Yeah,
because
of
it's
course.
it's going to use RF to heat up the food. But yes, it can do those things. And I mean, it's a matter of how much, of course. Any amount is going to have negative effects on your cells. And of course, it's because um, we use it seems as though we use RF for certain things within the body. We have systems that react to RF and electric fields and magnetic fields. We use all of those things inside the
Mm-hmm.
body. Again, it's very electrical. And so when you have artificial, um, of course, when you have non-native EMF sources that our body isn't, that are new to the body, then you're going to have interference with the functioning with the plumbing. And so if you have interference with the plumbing, you're going to get damage. And so that's where the double strand DNA breaks come from. And if you have too much of that, then you're going to have a lot of cell damage. You're going to have, you know, problems with mitosis. And if you
Yeah,
continue on that path and you have pollution in your environment, you're eating badly, your light environment is bad, you're going to get cancer. It's just
yeah.
one of the factors that cause cancer. That's why we have, like, you ask me, can it cause cancer? EMF can cause cancer. Bad food can cause cancer. A lack of sunlight can cause cancer. Pollution causes cancer. That's why all of these things cause cancer, because anything that is unhealthy can eventually cause cancer. So,
Mm-hmm.
yes, it does. But is it the only thing that causes cancer? No, it's the totality.
Maybe that's why like especially where I live, I think the cancer rate is 1 in 3. It's very, very high. The diabetes is 1 in 4. So maybe,
Well,
add up all everything, everybody eats like a bunch of rice. Then you add, the processed foods and it's starting to get worse. I think it was 1 in 6 a few years ago, and then now it's 1 in 3. So maybe that's it.
yeah, I believe it's very metropolitan over there. So when you have a
Yeah.
city, you're going to have high EMF levels. You're going to have what are they called? Cell towers everywhere. You're going to have you're reliant on imports because again you're in Singapore. And so you're going to have all these diseases because the light environment is incorrect, because you have all these artificial lights, you've got a bunch of EMF, you've got
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of pollution, or not in Singapore specifically, it's pretty clean
Mm-hmm.
over there. But in general, you don't have a bunch of, well, I haven't been to Singapore, so I can't really say. But in general, cities are not optimal environments for human beings. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, those things are going to happen.
I want to ask about pollution. Do you have any like good resources for pollution?
Good
Like
research.
any
What do
or
you
like
mean?
any
Do you mean books?
any books or like any videos, that I can learn from?
Books and videos. I'd say a good one is Toxic Legacy by Stephanie Seneff because, in the past, the way I used to think about pollution is, and the way I think you also should think about pollution is you get pollution into you, you get exposed to pollution, you get cell damage.
Mm-hmm.
That's the basic gist of it. But glyphosate is different because it goes into you and it substitutes for certain amino acids. It substitutes for glycine, and
Mm-hmm.
so imagine, your DNA says we're going to build this thing. And over here you have one piece of this thing. And then you suddenly this guy comes in and he takes the place of one of the parts, and he has this big backbone. And so this thing doesn't work anymore because the glyphosate sits there. So
Mm-hmm.
suddenly your cells are creating a bunch of stuff, but those proteins aren't working. So it's not just cell damage anymore. It's an invasion. It's an invasion that's causing stuff to not be produced correctly. It's very sneaky in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, something like radiation or
Mm-hmm.
mercury. You know, radiation would, just kill everything, and mercury would, if you've seen the video from the University of Calgary, it sort of binds to the tubulin protein, and the tubulin protein is very important for forming neurons, and so it doesn't bind to the place where it's supposed to go to form the
Mm-hmm.
neuron, and so you don't get any neurons. For example, that's why mercury causes cognitive decline. Um, but glyphosate is very sneaky because it substitutes for glycine, and it doesn't, from my understanding, it doesn't bind to anything specific and causes an explosion like pollution usually does. It
Yeah.
it substitutes for an amino acid, and it becomes a part of your cell. And so the proteins you create are just become dysfunctional, really. So you need to
Mm-hmm.
create far more proteins and this and that. So with pollution, I'd say you have to study things. Every type of pollution, every, atom or molecule will have certain effects in the body. The way I think about it is avoid everything that's man-made, really,
Mm-hmm.
unless, it really doesn't affect us. um, and everything else, causes cell damage. All the pollution causes cell damage.
Yeah.
That's the way I think about it. But if you want to know more about pollution, then just look up any artificial substance that's known
Mm-hmm.
to harm humans, and look at the mechanism by which it does that. Again, for mercury, you can see in the video that I have in my book, from the University of Calgary. They explain it pretty well. If you want to know about glyphosate and some pesticides as well, you can read Toxic Legacy by Stephanie Seneff, etc., etc. So when it comes to pollution, it's very you have two general rules, and then the rest you have to, study on your own. But will that make you healthier? No, it's just good knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
What makes you healthier is knowing where these things are in your environment. That's the important part. So for example, knowing that polyester clothes are microplastics, and those things,
Mm-hmm.
like if you rub, this is cotton, if I rub this like this, things go up in the air. You get those tiny particles that you usually see when a sunbeam shines at a certain place, and you see the tiny dust, fabric
Mm-hmm.
particles. And if that's from cotton and it's undyed and everything, then of course it's just cellulose. It's natural. It's fine if you breathe it in. But if it's heavily dyed cotton, or if it's polyester, then of course you're breathing that in. And are people aware of that? No, absolutely not. So when it comes to pollution, it's more about understanding where it is in your environment, not necessarily what it does to you. Because in general, whether you know what it does to you or not, you know that you should avoid it. So it's more about
Mm-hmm.
pollution awareness, I'd say. That's the important part when it comes to health in modern society.
So you have your one video, I think it's called How to Smell Good Without Getting Cancer.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's one video. Is there anything else besides to avoid besides that video? You know, the things listed in the video.
Yeah, those are mainly hygiene products.
Mm-hmm.
There's, of course, I made a video called, I think these clothing materials are toxic or something like that, or your clothes are toxic. That one
Mm-hmm.
deals with polyester and fabrics and everything, and nylon and viscose. Viscose is semi semi natural, so they get it from bamboo trees, but then they process it with chemicals, and so it might be
Mm-hmm.
a problem. So in general, I say that wool, knitted stuff, and cotton and linen, those are the main ones to stick to. But in general, I'll give you a few examples. So, for example, if you have this mic over here, this thing is made of plastic, and yeah, there is some pollution exposure. because I'm breathing near it. Um, these broken blue light blocking glasses.
Mm-hmm.
This is plastic. This is going to sit like over here. This is going to sit. This part right here is going to sit on my face. It's going to be touching my face. So yes, that is plastic exposure. There's also color on it. They've colored it, which means that that color is also going to be affecting my skin. You've got this dye over here. You've got the dye they use for the carpet over there. You know, if you have your nose stuck on that, because you know
Mm-hmm.
you're lying on your stomach, let's say, and your head is to the side, for example. You've got if you type on a keyboard or a mouse, you've got plastic residues on your hands because, of course, you have
Mm-hmm.
fat on your hands. That's going to, it's a very minimal amount, but again, it's there. You've got, mold. You've got mold here and there.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, if someone's smoking outside, obviously that's a source of pollution. If someone's cooking in seed oils and you breathe that in, there's no difference there in terms of how it affects your health. It will go into your body just the same as if you were to eat it. The only thing that differs is that the amount is far less. But if you have windows closed and you cook in seed oils every day and you're breathing that in, even though, let's say, you're not eating it because, it's a part of your family that's cooking with the seed oils, you're still going to get seed oil exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, if it's for a week because you're in another country, sure, I'll excuse you. But if you live there, you spend a lot of time there and you're going to be in that environment for several years, then of course that's pollution exposure. Open up the window. Being near roads in general, you
Yeah.
can always smell the smell of cars. Being especially careful when you start up the car, because in Sweden we call it katalysator. I guess it's catalyzer in English. Um, it starts working. It starts filtering out the toxic stuff and converting it to carbon dioxide once the car has been running for a while. So the fumes you get at the end of having used your car when you're going to park it, let's say, are going to be far less toxic than when you're just starting up the car, and
Yeah.
you can really feel that on the smell. So, always making sure that you don't breathe that in. Very good. When you fill up a car, for example, be very careful. Don't breathe that stuff in. It will destroy your brain. So always being able to wear something, or wearing something, um, is very important. And then let's say you're at a job where you have to clean some area. What I used to do, or what I do when I work, in the elderly facility. Again, it's sometimes, it's not always. I bring a shirt with me, a thick shirt, because I've found that a t-shirt isn't enough. You need something thick, and I bring it to my face. You hold the sleeves, and then the top part folds down. I put that on my nose, and then I tie it in the back, and then I bring it forward, and then I tuck the rest of the shirt into here, and then I start cleaning. And I found that I don't smell any of the cleaning products if I do that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's all about knowing what's toxic for humans or not. And then you've got food, of course. You've got some arsenic in rice. You've got glyphosate in non-organic stuff. You've got plastic residues from let's say vacuum packed meat that you have to scrape off. You've got some pollution in the water. I mean, it's everywhere, really. Those are
Mm-hmm.
those are the things that come to mind. Anything that interacts with your body, just investigate, or something that's close to you. Investigate whether there is some component in it that could be affecting you, and yeah, that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
So, for example, I'll give you just another example that might seem extreme, but I usually try to make sure it doesn't happen. Um, you in the kitchen we have like this place where you can cut stuff. Above it, there's a place where we keep glasses, and when I open that thing up, it smells really toxic. And I've noticed that, of course, dust comes out of there when you open it, and that might fall down on any food that's below on the cutting place, or the place where you can put your food. And so I tell my parents, please don't open that thing up when the food is there, so that nothing falls on it. And so that's the awareness you need to have, really. And again, if you do that once, sure, there's no impact. But whenever I speak of something, I'm speaking about it in terms of that being a factor or that being an action you take for the rest of your life. And then, of course, it will be significant in the end. So, yeah, those are some things.
You just look you just look at your environment and then find like what's the pollution in the environment, and then you see if there's any substitutes or how you can get rid of it.
Yes, exactly. So, just think about it like this. Let's say you're with an Amazonian tribe. Do you have to worry about anything? You have to worry about the animals there. You have to worry about not eating any bad plants. But the Amazonians, as long as you have the same knowledge that they have, let's say you're a part of that tribe, um, you already know what to avoid. You know, they've lived there for thousands of years. They have no problems navigating that place. They're very happy and healthy people, and they're not stressed because they're experts at navigating that environment. So, is there any pollution affecting them? Well, if we exclude things that might be coming from the modernized areas in, let's say, Brazil or Peru, no, no, they're not being affected by any pollution. And so what you do is you work backwards. Okay, so that's an environment with no pollution. Now, let's compare that with my environment and what I'm doing. Is there anything that could be affecting me? Well, yes. For example, something that many people don't think about is um, things disintegrate, things have small particles that slowly erode. So the walls in this room and the roof, everything here, all of that is, releasing very small particles that eventually I'll breathe in. Being outside, you don't have that factor. You just have fresh air, you have things from
Hmm.
nature. While here, you have all these building materials that are going to affect you. There's paint everywhere. And that paint, those dry pieces of paint, if you put your hand and you do this, some of them are going to be on your hand. Some of them are going to go out in the air. Is it significant? Not really. No. Um, but is it a factor that will affect you? Um, you know, because you live inside instead of outside, like we've always done. Yes, it does. And so, how do you solve that? Well, the Maasai build their houses from cow dung and I believe cement, something like that, and they put vegetation on the top to make a roof. Is that toxic? No, everything is natural. They built a house out of natural materials. In Nepal, I believe they build houses out of wood, on the countryside. Not in the big cities, of course. The big cities are modernized. Will that affect you? As long as there's no mold, no, because that's natural. So that's another thing.
So all these things, there's basically everything. Like I just look around me, everything I touch is basically all plastic.
Yes,
Like,
all
yeah.
that becomes a part of the air. If you touch it, it becomes a part of some of the residues go on your hand, etc., etc. Everything. I'd say the safest things are metal and glass. Wood, if it's not treated with any chemicals, it's fine. But usually, wood is treated with chemicals.
Mm.
Metal and glass, of course, they're usually also, there are a lot of chemicals involved in making them. Maybe not glass, depending on the type of glass, of course. But with metal, the finished product, it usually doesn't have any problems because it doesn't disintegrate in the same way. Those are going to be safe. But with plastic and other things, no, especially things that have a chemical coating on them.
So even like the water, right? I heard Paul Saladino, he said the fluoride. Is that a big issue as well?
Fluoride is a very big issue. Yes.
But
Well,
isn't the don't the toothpaste have like high sorry far higher concentrations of the fluoride than the water?
yeah, and that's why toothpaste is worse.
Toxic.
Yeah, that's why it's more toxic. So, so, it's like comparing diarrhea to a normal bowel movement. Which one would you rather eat? Well, they're both shit.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe a normal bowel movement would be better. Understand what I mean? So,
Yeah.
toothpaste, it's exposure to pollution. It's more exposure to pollution than in the drinking water. That doesn't mean that the drinking water isn't bad. So both
Mm-hmm.
of them are bad because they contain fluoride. Now there's natural fluorine, in nature in the water, that's fine. That's not a problem. Um, but sodium fluoride, and I believe also potassium fluoride, that they put in toothpaste, the artificial stuff, that I believe comes from the aluminum industry. That's not good. That's not good at all. And no, it's not good for your teeth. You need the natural, I believe, fluorine. Uh,
Yeah.
that stuff is good um, in the amounts that are found in nature. Um, but the stuff they put in toothpaste and in the drinking water, that's not the same stuff. That's not going to. That's just going to mess up your brain, really.
So even the clothes should get rid of the polyester ones for cotton.
Yes, that's what I did. Like 2 years, 2.5 years ago, something like that. You basically check all the labels, or yeah, the labels on your clothes, and you see, okay, is this 100% cotton? And if you see 10% polyester, throw it away. 100%
Mm.
polyester, no, don't burn it, but yeah, throw it away because burning it would be pretty counterintuitive in our case. So yeah, and nylon as well. The only thing I'd say is acceptable is elastane. If it's like five
Mm.
percent, they usually put it in pants to make them a little bit stretchy. That's usually fine. But polyester, I don't like. Um, what's it called? Acrylic as well. Acrylic, nylon, polyester. Those are the main ones, and polyamide as well. I also threw out anything with viscose in it, or yes, only if they were very dyed. I have pants that have a like 30-20% viscose, but that's fine. It's mostly cotton and it's also viscose. Viscose isn't again, it comes from I believe it comes from palm trees, so or beech trees, something like that. But viscose is fine to some degree. But if it's 100% viscose, then I would throw it away. The way you'd figure out for a specific phone is if you get an EMF meter and you do the testing from all sides, so from the
Mm-hmm.
bottom, from the front, from the sides as well, because on some phones they make it so that the antenna emits in a certain direction. That's why Samsung is better because their
Mm-hmm.
antenna emits from the back. So
Yeah.
you put it on mobile data, you check, and then you do it with Wi-Fi. And what I found is, especially on Samsung phones, if you put it on airplane mode and Wi-Fi, it's far better than mobile data
Mm-hmm.
usually. So yeah, and then you can also have the because it's not just mobile data and Wi-Fi. You also have the cellular signal, so you can turn off Wi-Fi and you can still call. But if you put it on airplane mode, the cellular signal goes away. So if you have Wi-Fi and the cellular signal, then that's double the RF because those are two different bands. If
Mm-hmm.
I've understood it correctly. So when you put it on airplane mode, you remove one type of RF signaling, and so the total strength goes down.
So it depends on the phone mainly.
Yes, it does. I've noticed that with iPhones, it doesn't really make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
You put it on mobile data, like if you've seen the beginning of my EMF video, you look there and you see, oh, when I'm putting it on Wi-Fi and airplane mode, it's sort of the same strength as the mobile data. And
Mm-hmm.
then yeah, I've checked on Note 8, my Note 8, and if you put it on airplane mode and Wi-Fi, it's like 20 milliwatts per square meter, something like
Mm-hmm.
that, up to 60. Then you put it on mobile data and it goes up to 200, 250, just like the iPhone
Yeah.
does. So, yes, it does depend on the phone. And in general, the lower the SAR value, when you measure it, it will be lower.
Hey, I wanted to ask you about the floor sleeping thing. So there was this guy I found called Movementum, and he recommends that you don't just sleep on the floor. You also get rid of your furniture. So instead of having like a desk, you work on the floor. Do you think that's mainly like pseudoscience, or do you think that that could have some benefit?
I mean, it depends on your habits. If you have a habit of, like, if you have a bad chair, for example, or if you have
Mm-hmm.
a chair that will make you slouch, those things are far harder to do when you're on the floor because on the floor you have to maintain a good posture. Generally speaking, if you're going to sit on the floor, you're not going to have something behind you unless you have the wall behind you. So it
Mm-hmm.
makes you far more aware of your posture, and so yes, it's going to be better. But in general, let's say what's more important in terms of working on the computer and this and that, especially when you're doing something like writing, for example, when you don't need
Mm-hmm.
Wi-Fi. is you work outside instead. That's the biggest difference in terms of health, in my opinion. And also, like if you're sitting on a bench outside, generally speaking, your posture is going to be better because it depends on the bench, of course, but usually you're going to have the bench where you have a sort of table and then you don't have anything behind you. And so your posture
Yeah.
is going to be better. At least we have those kinds of benches in Sweden. And you'll also be able to ground, usually, because if you're sitting outside, then usually the weather is all right. It's not raining or anything. So, yeah.
So you recommend that I should start working outside?
I mean,
Just use.
if you have a laptop and you have a good
Mhm.
place outside, where you can do the work without being distracted, and there are no factors like cars going by and gassing you or whatever, then yes, it's a big recommendation because
Mhm.
then the light that your eyes are getting is from the sun. It's not filtered through the windows and it's not artificial light. And the artificial light that's coming from the screen, you know, it's not going to be as significant because you have all this light around you. That's what Jack
Yeah.
Cruz does. Like when you see me doing an interview with him, he's always outside and he's shirtless, and there's a reason for that. Yeah, he understands that when he's outside, that's the healthiest thing to do
Mhm.
because again, it's congruent with what we've done throughout our existence.
I'm assuming you don't go outside because it's very cold, right? Since you're in Sweden.
Well, for the past few months, it has been pretty nice.
Mhm.
In May, June, July, our entire summer has been nice. But then I'd say after October, late October, then it gets really bad. Like I can
Mhm.
handle some of the cold that comes in September and early October, but then after October, especially when November comes, then it starts getting really cold. So then you have
Mhm.
to wear more clothes, and then you go outside less. And also the sunlight hours in general, where there's light outside, they drastically decrease. The difference in the day length time in Sweden is 6 hours. And that's why I advocate for not being, at extreme latitudes because then during the winter you'll have very short days. During the summer you'll have very long days, and that messes up your sleep schedule. So that's another factor as well.
So now for you would be summer, right?
Yeah, I mean it's the 1st of September, so like now summer's ending, sort of.
Mhm.
It's getting colder. It started getting colder. So yes, I'd say we have a pretty short summer. Like it's the 59th latitude. It's not nice over here.
So I want to ask, the hunter gatherers, right? Or at least a lot of the natural tribes. I don't think any of them would have joint pain, right? So do you think any of these joint pains or any of these things could come from like seed oils? Would that be like a contributing factor?
Yes, I mean, seed oils accumulate everywhere. They hinder blood flow, they increase our triglycerides, they do a bunch of things that are bad, um,
Mhm.
increase inflammation, cell damage in general. They won't just affect your heart, they'll affect your liver, they'll affect your brain, and of course, they'll affect your musculoskeletal system. So, yes,
Mhm.
they can cause joint pain, definitely. And then the mechanisms are always very complex because
Yeah.
you affect this thing, it affects that thing, it affects that thing, and then
Mhm.
many different webs of things that connect into affecting the joints. The joints are affected through multiple angles because of any unhealthy thing. That's usually how it works with the body.
It's like with EMF, even if it affects melatonin, then after melatonin can go affect sleep, and then your sleep can affect like your liver, and then that can affect everything else, right?
Exactly. Exactly. That's how it works. Yes.
Okay. I saw at the your six health commandments at the actionable checklist, you said like mouth breathing causes cell death. What do you mean by that?
Well, you're lowering the amount of oxygen you have in your body.
Hmm.
You're not getting the correct amount of air. Like your nose does many things. You get the correct amount of air, you're breathing in the correct tempo, then it warms up the air, it filters it, it does many things. If you breathe through the mouth, you won't have enough oxygen, and your CO2 levels will be messed up as well, which does cause hypoxia. And the reason I
Hmm.
know that is because in general, when you look at a mouth breather, they're not just going to look bad in the face. They're also going to be the reason why we associate being stupid with mouth breathing is because
Hmm.
it's actually observable. Because when you breathe through the mouth, your brain becomes hypoxic, like not super hypoxic, but a little bit, and that will affect cognitive function. Then you start breathing through the nose again. and
Mm.
your brain works better. And that's why when we see someone who, doesn't, let's say, doesn't talk a lot or breathe slowly or is very calm, we associate that with intelligence, because that's generally associated with breathing well. And then there are other factors as well, but that's just one thing that many people don't think about. So yes, um, breathing through your nose makes you smarter. If you breathe through your mouth, you'll get dumber because of brain hypoxia.
So you said that breathing through the mouth, is associated. We associate these type of like these faces with people that are less intelligent because they have less oxygen to the brain, so they are actually less intelligent. So would this apply for like other features as well?
Yes, I'd say it does. Like, if you have a skull that isn't developed well, that
Mm-hmm.
tells me that you haven't eaten a lot of animal foods. So generally speaking, when you look at people who don't have developed skulls, and this comes from Weston A. Price's book, if you haven't gotten enough fat-soluble nutrients and also minerals, you don't have the necessary resources to, grow the skull. And so it's going to be very, very, it seems like nature, whenever something goes wrong in the body, it tries to tell other organisms that that's the case. So it really affects the skull and the face the most, because that's usually where humans would look, or mammals would look at each other. I'd say
Mm-hmm.
the head. That's at least where humans express a lot of emotion, other mammals as well. So you're going to see that the skull takes a big hit. You'll see that in the skeletal system in general. Um, but yes, and so if you haven't gotten enough minerals and fat-soluble vitamins, let's say during puberty, that's going to affect the way you move, your strength, your intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
um, your ability to survive, and you're going to be able to see that on the skull of the person, for example.
So like the vitamins A and D, aren't they antagonists?
A and D, yes. Actually, I learned something very interesting from Frank Tufano. I think it's not only that all the fat soluble vitamins are competing, especially in the digestive
Mm-hmm.
tract, not necessarily with vitamin D. If you're eating vitamin D, then that's the case. But if you get it through the skin, then that's not the case, because then it doesn't need to compete in the intestines. It's not just that, it's that to get vitamin D, you have to get UV. And UV
Mm-hmm.
is a little bit harsher than the rest of the light spectrum. So or that part of the light spectrum is more harsh. So your cells need to regenerate, just like, and that's not a bad thing, as I say in the sunlight video.
Mm-hmm.
Just like when you do strength training or you use your muscles, you carry something, your brain muscles break down, and then your body repairs them. So it's the same with the skin. It's not that UV is bad, it's just a natural process. It seems as though because vitamin A is needed for creating epithelial cells, when you sunbathe a lot, you'll use up more vitamin A. So
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty cool relationship. So if you're someone who doesn't sunbathe a lot, then you have to be more careful with vitamin A. If you sunbathe a lot and your vitamin D, is high and you're tan, which you've probably used a lot of vitamin A. You're using more vitamin A in general, which means that you can eat more vitamin A,
Mm-hmm.
or you need more vitamin A. But usually, like when I think about people like you and me who are eating a lot of animal foods, we generally have a lot of vitamin A. So we need to be careful with it. Other people who haven't eaten this way for a long time, let's say, or maybe you haven't, but me, for example, I've been eating this way for a long time. I have to be careful with
Mm-hmm.
vitamin A so that I don't get an excess. But with people who you know haven't eaten this way a long time, young people who are just starting with an animal-based diet, they don't have to worry. They're vitamin A deficient. Most people are vitamin A deficient.
Mm-hmm.
So yes,
I thought vitamin A toxicity can only come from the unnatural types.
I wouldn't say so. There have been cases of some people, I believe, when you eat vitamin A for very prolonged periods of time, your liver can only store so much. So at
Mm-hmm.
some point you will get damage. That is the case. Um, with the polar bear example, I learned this from Anthony Chaffee. You might have heard of the story where these polar explorers ate polar bear liver or their dogs' livers, and they got vitamin A poisoning, and everyone died. That's
Mm-hmm.
because carnivorous livers, so livers from carnivorous animals, have 100 times more vitamin A than, let's say, a ruminant animal's liver. And that's obvious because a ruminant animal is getting far less vitamin A into them. They get it,
Mm.
they have to convert it. I believe they have to convert it from, the beta carotene in the grass, for example, if it's a cow, into vitamin A. So their livers contain 100 times less vitamin A. So if you're taking a bite out of a polar bear liver, that's like taking 100 bites of, cow's liver. And that's like an
Yeah.
entire liver. So you take 2 bites, 3 bites, that's like eating 3 cow livers. So of course you're going to get vitamin A toxicity. So yeah, there is natural vitamin A toxicity. Anything in excess will cause severe problems, but will you reach it through eating liver consistently? It's very hard. If you're eating liver, big amounts of liver every week for like several months, then yes, that will happen. Um, but yeah, it sort of gives you a contrast as to uh, what it takes to get severe problems, and you get severe problems from eating, 100 livers, 100 cow livers. That would be, yeah.
So what is like the general range of like how much liver will be too much?
I'd say
How would
when
you
you
tell?
crave it. When you crave it, that's your body telling you that it needs that specific food. If it tastes good in general, if you eat it once a week and it tastes good, then that's fine. For me, intuitively, um, I eat it, and this is, my body, so I don't know how it applies to everyone else. But the way I think about it is if you get it in here and there, like 300 grams, 400 grams every 1 to 2 weeks
Hmm.
or less, that's fine. And especially if it's veal liver, because I believe a veal liver hasn't accumulated the same amount of vitamin A as a, mature cow liver. So,
Hmm.
yeah, veal liver every 2 to 3 weeks if you've been eating this way for a long time, or just once a week, or even every day, but not big meals, of course. If you're just starting out, I think that's fine. And it also depends on the quality. Like if you have really good quality liver, then I believe the benefits outweigh any potential negatives far more because it's such high quality. But if it's less, if the quality is bad where you're at, let's say, and you can't get access to high quality liver, I'd eat it once every 1 to 2 months, just so you're getting it in there, really. But since the quality is bad, then you shouldn't be eating it in excess.
I know for you, your staple is raw dairy, right?
For hydration, yes, and bacteria. It's my
Yeah.
bacteria source and it's my source of hydration. Lately, I've been drinking spring water. I've been going with my friend to a spring here in Stockholm, and the water's really really clean. Um, and I've been drinking that, and I found that like I think I go through say 8 liters in 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks, something like that. So it's
Hmm.
a small amount of water every day. And sometimes I just rinse my mouth with it and spit it out. Um, but I have been feeling better on it. So I think a small amount of water, even Audience Vanderplans recommended it. He, or not recommended it, but he drank water, like small
Hmm.
amounts, just like I do. And I believe he did it intuitively. He felt, okay, I want water. My body's telling me I want water. And so he drank water. And I'm doing the same thing. And I believe some people, they read "We Want to Live" and they go, "Oh, water is bad, so I should never drink it," even though their body's telling them that it needs a
Hmm.
little bit of water. In general, if you're drinking a little bit of water, it gets absorbed quite quickly, and since it's not a big amount, it won't lead to any kidney stress. It having to filter out
Hmm.
a bunch of excess water. So no, it's just the body telling you that oh, it needs a little bit of water. But when it comes to dairy, I mean, yes, it is what I said earlier is what it does for me. Yes.
So in Singapore, raw dairy is illegal. So in the whole region, no matter where you go, it's all illegal. So do you recommend that? Uh, I've heard some people try to ferment meat, like raw meat, in a jar. Do you think that's a good way to get bacteria in?
Well, just on the legality side of things, it's illegal here in Stockholm as well. It's illegal in most of the Western world.
Mhm.
However, um, I guess you don't have local farms in
Yeah.
Singapore. I guess that's the problem. But in general, even though it's illegal in many states, or I should say countries,
Hmm.
um, usually it's okay if you go to a local farm and buy it. So yes, it's illegal here, but I still get it without any problems whatsoever. When it comes to fermenting meat, yes, as long as it's a jar that doesn't have any dish soap in it, it's you've used it for other things, let's say, so the food has absorbed anything that might be in there. Uh,
Mm.
it's pollution free. You don't have too much plastic at the top or anything like that. Um, yeah, it would be a good alternative, sure. And then just be careful about the meat. The way I would do it is since you don't want plastic residues to ferment in there because that can cause
Mm.
problems. So what I'd do is I'd scrape it thoroughly, very thoroughly, all sides that have touched plastic, and then I would put it in there.
So I get a jar, wash it with white vinegar,
Yeah, that's
and
fine.
then I put the meat inside.
Yeah, you can do that. And then you just I guess you can do it in the fridge and you can do it in room temperature, but just be
Mm.
careful so that your family doesn't slap the shit out of you, because that thing will stink. Okay, so whenever you open up the jar, open it up outside.
Yeah.
That's my recommendation. And also, yeah, if you're going to eat it, of course you need to open it, so then eat it outside as
Hmm.
well. Extra benefits, sunlight.
How long would you recommend that I ferment it for?
I mean, with these kinds of things, from the people I've looked at, they generally they keep it in there for 3 to 4 weeks, and then they start eating it,
Mm.
and then they eat a little chunk here and there, and then they just let it be until they're done with it, until they're done eating it. So it's not a specific amount of time necessarily. I'd say after it's gotten funky, then you have the bacteria in there, and then the more you keep it there, the more the bacteria will transform and do things. um, so if you leave it in there after a year and you're continuing to eat it, because let's say it's a very big jar, that's fine. Just as long as it gets a bit funky, 3 to 4 weeks. Um, After that, you'll start getting the effects. Let's say, especially if it's been in um, room, yeah, in room temperature, because in the fridge it's going to be a slower process. Arginus, I believe he had a different view on this. I think he said 12 weeks, and you have to air out the jar every 2 to 3 days, and
Hmm.
the bacteria will go through many different stages of, you know, evolution or something like that. And I don't know the exact details, but I believe I can find the place in the Q&As where he talks about that if you're interested.
And then would you recommend I also add more meat into the jar just over time?
You can. You can, because I believe if you have a bunch of fermented meat in there and then you add
Mm.
meat there, then you'll already have the bacteria. The bacterial growth in the fermentation process will be quicker. And so yes, if you feel very good on it and you want to have more access to it, you want to have more of it, you want to make more, then yes, adding meat over time is a pretty good idea to not run out of it. Yes.
So it's not the main source of calories, right? It's just like maybe I have my normal muscle meat and organs, and then you have the fermented meat, right?
You
How would you go about
can
it?
you can actually make it your main source. It's just
Hmm.
that it's a bit harder. And
Hmm.
it seems as though this is something Arjun has talked about. Some people have done this, and Arjun has always warned that, it does cause detoxification. But when it is the case that all you're eating is fermented meat, then you won't get the same effects because your body's relying on it in a different manner. And in general, some people don't get detoxification from eating high meat. They just, get the bacteria, the benefits of a probiotic, and that's it. Um, so, I mean, you can do it both ways. It's just less convenient, I'd say. But if you have the means to do it, sure. And I think it will depend on how well you react to it. Some people, you know, get amazing benefits. Some people don't feel anything in particular, like Emily,
Hmm.
we talked about earlier. Um, she ate high meat. She didn't feel anything in particular, I believe.
Hmm. Well, you talked about detoxification. Isn't detoxification good for the body?
It is, but you have to control it. So you can do certain things that will cause you to detoxify a lot quicker, like coffee enemas, but that's going to hurt the liver. And I've had clients who done coffee enemas for a long time and they started having liver pain, and I told them, "Oh, you need to stop doing the coffee enemas. That's the problem
Mm.
you're having." you've been detoxifying too much. You've been punching the liver too hard. So you have to, relax a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
they did that, and from my understanding, having talked to them, that worked wonders. So you have to be careful. Um, in general, detoxification through the skin is the safest and best way. That's why I
Mm-hmm.
always recommend saunas, hot baths, things like that. And sunbathing as well. You can also sunbathe, and the UV and the red light will obviously cause you to sweat if it's, sufficiently
Mm-hmm.
hot outside. So that's a way to do it. If you don't want to go to a sauna or if the water is bad, you can just sweat in the sun. It's a free sauna, really, and you get all the benefits of sunlight as well. So yeah, detoxification is good, but you have to control it.
I remember in the Six Health Commandments, under the commandment of processing, you wrote that if you were to ferment cooked meat, then you're basically gonna ferment the acrylamide, right? And the all the toxins.
Yes, it's not just that. It's that obviously we don't have science that
Mm-hmm.
completely explains what's happening, but it seems as though that when you cook something, you completely kill all the bacteria and
Mm-hmm.
all the microorganisms. What starts to grow on that tissue, let's say, is going to be toxic to human beings. It isn't controlled at all. Like
Mm-hmm.
anything can grow on there, and what they're eating is also partly toxic. When you're fermenting raw meat, the reason why there's surströmming in Sweden and there's um, other fermented meat dishes all
Mm-hmm.
across the world, and people eat them and they don't get sick. The reason is because what you're doing is you're taking a tissue that has its own bacterial environment. You
Mm-hmm.
have specific strains of bacteria that protect against any other strains of bacteria, any other fungi, anything that shouldn't grow there, anything that isn't native to that piece of meat. And you're letting those things grow, and they're, eating up the meat and shitting it out, fermenting it. So you have a closed, safe environment that the bacteria are working on that isn't toxic, that is healthy, and you have the
Mm-hmm.
correct strains there, and that ferments, and then you eat it, and then there's no problem there because the same bacteria, the same fungi, the same microorganisms are feeding on something good, and they're the same microorganisms that were there in the first place. It's just that there are more of them now because you've let them grow. So yeah, that's the reason why you don't get sick if you ferment raw meat or raw milk. And then with raw milk, it's the same thing. And the reason why this is very clear to me, at least, is because um, there's this woman called Sandrine Perez, and I link her article in my book as well. She took 4 jars. She put very high pasteurized milk, very processed milk, and then pasteurized whole milk, and then something in between as well. Something that was high pasteurized, and something that was ultra high pasteurized. So the one that with a very long shelf life, but they've processed it immensely. And then she had a fourth jar of raw milk, and she let them all stay outside in room temperature for 3 weeks. So sort of what I do with the raw milk, but she did it with the other ones. And the more processed the milk was, the more they had boiled it, um, the more mold there was on the surface and in the container in general. And then you look at the raw milk and there was no mold there whatsoever. And the reason why
Mm-hmm.
is because the natural bacterial environment prevents any microorganism from growing. But when you have dead organic tissue, anything eats it up, really. And since you do have toxins that form, the environment isn't very good anymore. So what the bacteria are feeding on, the fungi are feeding on, is not something that is a good environment. It's an unclean environment. It's a bad environment. It's a toxic environment. So what they'll create is toxins. So that this is sort of what terrain theory says. Um, it's not the bacteria, it's the environment that the bacteria are in. And is terrain theory correct? I don't know all the details of terrain theory. What I do know is that what terrain theory says is more close to what's happening in reality, at least with raw animal foods, than bacterial or germ theory, I should say.
So that's why you close the jar, right? So you can actually ferment and create an environment.
I wouldn't say so. Like the important part, like whether you close it or not, it doesn't matter. It's still protected. The reason you want to have something on top of the jar is because you don't want dust to go in there. That's the main thing. And the reason you don't want to, remove airflow is because the jar can explode. So sometimes, a lot of gas builds up when you ferment something, and then you open it and it explodes. Or the jar can explode if the pressure builds up too much. So you have to have a way for the air to escape. And that's why I
Mm-hmm.
generally say cover it, but don't, completely close the lid. And in reality, it doesn't matter a lot. If you keep enough space in the jar for air, um, usually it's okay. There's enough space for it to not overflow to begin with, and also you'll be able to open it, several times throughout the fermentation process, so not enough air will build up for it to explode. The explosion thing comes from it overflowing really when you open it. Sort of what happens with Coca-Cola cans and everything when you shake them.
So if I put not enough, if there's not enough air in the jar and then I open it, then it might have, something might explode.
Yeah, I mean with
Something
raw
pop.
milk, yes, but with with the raw meat, it's fine.
Yeah.
um I remember, like, I put my jars like over there on the camera behind the bed. And I remember waking up once and I was hearing this sound, like it's something like that, like air was escaping something. And then I'm tired and I stand up, I open up the curtains a little bit so that I can see, there's still some artificial lights outside the window at night. And then I look down and I see this mess, like all the raw milk has run over the sides and it's all on the ground. And I went, oh my God, like because so much air accumulated in the jar, and it pushed the raw milk up, and then it ran out, the sides and everything. So I had to clean that, and then I went to sleep again. So yes, that can happen.
So, but that shouldn't be a problem with meat, right? Since it's
No, no, no.
not like.
With raw, when you ferment raw meat, generally speaking, what if I remember correctly from what Argenis said, he says fill the jar halfway, like
Mhm.
halfway, or leave a quarter, something like that. You want air to be in the jar because you want to have oxygen in there. That's why you open it a few times during the fermentation process, because you want to introduce oxygen to it. Because then you also get the aerobic bacteria, not just the anaerobic
Mhm.
bacteria.
Did you talk about this in the recipe for living without disease? Or is it mainly in the we want to live?
I'm not sure actually. I'm not sure, but it is for certain in the Q&As. There are many great websites, or the greatest website in my opinion is Ogenus.net. That website is amazing. You go there and you search for high meat in the search bar, and you'll find every single work of Ogenus where he's mentioned high meat. So you know, it's you should look there, and I can send you the exact section if you want to.
Sure.
Any more questions, my friend?
Yeah. So I also want to ask about the semen retention thing. So I realized like over a few months, there's been quite a lot of benefits. But the thing I wanted to ask is about like, all the tribes, they had a lot of children, right? Like there was one woman, I think the Eskimo, she had 26 different children. So I want to ask, how would that apply to like the cavemen? Since, a lot of the tribes people didn't have any of these problems, and then, they were still having a lot of children.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between what the average man is doing nowadays and what those
Hmm.
tribes people were doing. And then again, not all tribes people were aware that um, retaining is a good thing. Usually that comes from the more, when you look at the more upper class esoteric kind of groups in society that we used to have or still have, they usually understand this and they usually advocate for, being chaste and everything.
Hmm.
Um, what the average man does is he loses seminal fluid, every day, several times, or like a few times a week. If you add that up over a year or several years, that's a lot. When you're going to have children, you're using that fluid to create a life. That's very different. That is very, very different. Because you're creating a life, you're actually using it for a good purpose, and you're not destroying your brain with the corn, the material that you'd usually watch.
Mm-hmm.
So the situation you have in modern society is very, very different. That's one thing. The other thing is that these tribes people are getting way more nutrients than us. They're grounded all day. They're getting a lot of sunlight. They have far less pollution in their environment. They're from a health perspective, their lives are practically perfect, which means they have far, far higher resilience. Which means that, as I say in the anti-nutrients video, if you have one person with IBS who eats gluten,
Mm-hmm.
the damage points he'll take are like 100 to 200. You have a tribal person, and even though the food isn't, healthy, he'll take 1 to 2 points of damage, even
Yeah.
maybe, half a point of damage. So it's the same with losing seminal fluid. If they lose seminal fluid, um, they'll take far less damage than someone else who's sick in modern society. So I'd say in modern society, it's far more detrimental to lose a lot. And then it's when it's excessive, that's the main problem.
Mm-hmm.
But if you retain permanently, then of course that's the minimal amount of nutrient loss. So yeah, that's what I'd say. And again, if you tie it into what Jack Cruz says, uh, usually blue light toxicity is related to addictions. And so what you'd find is that these tribes people, they wouldn't have the desire to do these things as much as people in modern society do. People are far um, more prone to being addicted because of the modern environment. And so that's why it's extra important for me to emphasize that practice because in modern society it's a big problem, and you also can't afford to lose a lot of the fluid because it's hard to produce, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very nutrient rich. And if you lose a lot of it, then you're
That's what
going
it
to have
sounds.
problems.
Okay, I have one last question. So you talked about pollution yesterday, right? There's a lot of things like instead of using a plastic container, you could use a glass container. But then there are still some things like let's say a keyboard. Like the most things I can think of is maybe you get a mechanical keyboard, use some rubber keycaps, but then there's still plastic on there, right? So do you think it would just be better to just accept that there are some things you can't change?
Yeah, in modern society, of course. Like I also use a
Yeah.
keyboard. I have a Corsair K70 that I bought when I was 14, a long time ago. Now that I think of it, but so you don't have to worry that much. Like with this mic, I wouldn't want a foam filter that's made of some material that's
Yeah.
cotton or something like that. Yeah, that would be pretty good. If someone's selling that, then sure, let's buy it. But looking for those things is pretty hard. Um, so there are like in general, you're not licking the keyboard, you're not eating the keycaps,
Mm-hmm.
and you can wash your hands as well. And then when it comes to it being absorbed transdermally, it's not something that's based in water, or it's not something that's liquidy in that sense, and that releases fumes in the same way. It's pretty solid,
Mm-hmm.
so for the most part, it's fine. It's all right. It's just that it is a source. It is something in your
Yeah.
environment. Um, and if you're unconscious and let's say you use your keyboard and you eat with the same hand, for example,
Mm-hmm.
that becomes a problem. But if you're conscious of the fact that the keyboard's made of plastic, and when I use it, I will have plastic residues on my fingers because my fingers contain oil and oil breaks down the plastic,
Mm-hmm.
then you'll know that, okay, I shouldn't put my fingers in my nose or my mouth, or rub my face too much, or eat with this hand. I should wash it with some healthy soap, and then I can do those things, for example.
So yeah, so you talked about the negative and positive effects of food, right?
Yes.
Yes. So I think, for example, like the blue light blockers, right? So even though it might have some plastic, the benefit is that now you won't have all the blue light when it's nighttime, right? So that
Yes.
would be worth it, of course, right?
Yes, certainly. So with the blue light blocking glasses, usually they're made of acetate. I believe
Mm-hmm.
acetate is pretty stable. I don't think it's a big problem. Like when it comes to me saying that it touches this place on the face, etc., that's fine. That's not going to affect you quite a lot. It is something that is affecting the skin to some degree, but is it
Mm-hmm.
significant enough to care about it? No. The benefits far outweigh the negatives, and the negatives are barely there. It's not something I generally um, care about in that sense. I care about it if I have oil on my face, because then the glasses will get dirty and the breakdown will be a bit more. But in general, no, those things you don't really need to worry about them. It's more of if you have if your bed sheets are made of nylon or polyester, that's when you really have to care.
Mhm.
For example. Well, in that case, thank you. No.
Thank you.